Hi, so this is a talk about graffiti and the survey we did in St Michael's Church, Aldbourne. This is an updated version of a talk I gave a while back, and we've extended it a little bit and added a bit more interpretation. So, what are we talking about? Graffiti. Oh, first I should just say thank you to these good folk who helped. Made it possible for me to get to all the different places and help me look for the graffiti. So the graffiti, this isn't what we're talking about, thankfully, but it's surprising quite how much there is. This is the sort of thing that we're looking at. Some of it's quite old. Style there really suggests it's old. Why did I start doing this though? Well, I'd read an article in the Current Archaeology magazine about a survey being done across Norfolk looking at graffiti. This is a traced image where, if you went to the church, it wouldn't actually be black. Someone's traced over the image just so that you can see it more easily. And I just wondered what we'd got, whether you could see such interesting things here in Aldbourne. So one of the good things about doing it is actually we get to record it. Some of it is very ephemeral. It's being done in pencil. Pencil really doesn't last well. It gets rubbed. You can't make out what that is anymore. Some of it is obscured. This is in pencil, but you won't be able to see it now because the cupboards are built in front of it. This dates from the coronation. We can see a date across the middle of the screen there, June the 22nd, 1911, which was George V's coronation. These guys were almost certainly bell ringers. And we'll come back to bell ringers. We're feeding the results of this survey into a whole survey. It's being done across the whole of Wiltshire, and sometimes multiple visits seem to show up new ones. This Joe and Penny one. I'd swear it wasn't there the first time I visited. A lot of the images you were using raking light to make it a bit more obvious, so that's where a torch has been shone at an angle across the stone, and that gives you a bright side to the cut and a dark side to the cut, which helps it show up. But as I've just shown you back in this image, sometimes we actually take a copy of the photo, trace over it in black ink, electronic black ink, to make it a bit more obvious what's being shown. Where do we find it? Well, it's in the body of the church, on the pews, at the base of the tower, in the ringing chamber, and even in the lead on the tower roof. But we couldn't find any in the chancel. There may be some in more inaccessible corners as well, but we haven't got to those yet. Much of it is in stonework, and is easily accessed by everyone. This is John Bond, who seemed to be very keen to leave his mark on the south side. It's sort of legible, but we can improve that for you. So he definitely had multiple goes at leaving his name. The interesting thing with this one, if we zoom into some other lettering there, you'll see, especially in the lower half of each of those letters, you can make out lime wash still in the lettering. So the letters were obviously cut certainly before lime wash was there, and obviously we've had the lime wash stripped off again, so that suggests quite some age. But John Bond doesn't show in the parish register entries that we have. So this could well date to before the first parish register that we've got, which would be in the mid-1600s. That would sort of fit with the style. It does. The style of the text does look quite old. That's another one of the same area, showing the effect. Really shows the effect of the raking light. They don't always show quite as well as that, but a very distinct shadow. So moving on, even the pews aren't immune. This CW for MW for sound is probably fairly recent. That whole use of the digit 4 to mean 4 is, I think, fairly recent. There's not very much on the north side of the church, interestingly. We haven't been able to find any in the chancel, which is in some ways sort of reassuring. We haven't been able to get to the room that used to be above the porch. That, I suspect, would have been the prime spot, given that they used to be a schoolroom, used to be used as a schoolroom. But that whole area was seriously remodelled, so we can't tell, unfortunately. Some of it's not very accessible. This is a photo montage of the north side of the tower above the units, where a floor used to be, and was probably used by either bell ringers or musicians. So all of those little red lines mark out portions of graffiti that I've managed to identify. So this is just using a telephoto lens, so this not very easy. You might not be able to see that very well, so I've highlighted them in red. That's quite a lot of graffiti we've got up there, and if you rotate through 180 degrees, that's the south side. Even more. I would love to get up there to have a look at it. Yeah, there's just a vast amount up there. That's a close-up of just one stone. I reckon there's at least 10 different pieces of graffiti on there, so there's just a very large amount. Notice these things wouldn't have been very quick to carve, some of them. You must have had to have a fairly solid implement as well. You don't just go along, people probably didn't have the house keys, so what on earth were they carving it with? You'd have probably taken the tip off your penknife if you were using a penknife. But anyway, so bell ringers and musicians seem to be a bit of a recurrent theme. I suppose they're hanging around waiting in the church. So bell ringers, if we go up to the current bell ringing chamber, we do get more modern stuff up there as well. And onto the tower roof in the lead. These are traced over images because you can't see it so well if you just by eye. And some of the stuff that's no longer visible. This is down in the base of the tower. Thankfully, photos were taken before the units were fitted, and we actually get to have a record of it. Some of my cousins managed to leave their mark. They seem to keep on cropping up in my talks. 1918, was this a Westall just about to go to war or just coming back? Why were they feeling the need to leave their mark for posterity on the church? It's rather haunting to consider. But there's quite a bit of that style, I think. So, some of the problems, it's a bit of a palimpsest at times with writing on top of writing, obscuring writing, damaging writing, making it very hard to disentangle, certainly by eye. Done my best here to mark out some of the various pieces. But you can see it's really on top of each other and obscuring it. This is another example. All different sorts of bits. I've haven't managed to trace everything here, and there's even pencil in there as well. And obviously sometimes some of the stuff, you know, as you're carving, you're rubbing other stuff, and it just gets made indistinct. Even more so on the tower roof, where footfall is an issue, and sometimes the wear just makes it very hard to read. If we zoom the images, though, we can trace some of the lines, but you do end up having to zoom it in quite a lot to be able to understand what was there. You don't always understand what's there until you've finished marking all the lines and zoom out again, and then you actually can make more sense of it. Sometimes, though, folk were very determined to make a mark, and Juliana Edwards has her name scribed very deeply into the lead. And then another style using some heavy implement, the WN, that isn't going to go away in a hurry either. Whereas William seems to have got rather interrupted, using some sharp edge to make his name, and then seems to have run out of time. So we can look at some of the things and understand how old they are just from the style of the text. Here we've got handy dates which also confirm it. But other examples, you know, we can see the style isn't the style of text that we'd write these days. The pencil on the wood is very obviously older, rather confirmed in this case by having a date just right of the wiring there. And then these are older yet. That crossed I isn't something anyone would write now. And these, from their position, these pretty much guaranteed to predate the renovation that was done in the 1860s. And on the font, we also get some dates as well, from 1680 in the lead. Lead's so much easier to make a mark in. Of course, it does wear down quicker as well. And while we're on dates, if you go to the base of the tower, then look up on the north side on the arch that joins the tower to the main body of the church, you get 1664, which is one of the oldest dates that I'm aware of in the church. And while we're on dates, that segues nicely into names. Certain Mr. Terry Gilligan managed to leave his name on the roof. So we've got a vast number of names in various forms, quite a lot of initials again. One of the more unusual ones is Sappers Rowland and Stewart from the 204th Field Company Royal Engineers in 1915. When we first found this, we weren't quite sure what they would have been doing here in 1915, but apparently the Ordnance Survey were doing a resurvey of the country in 1915, and the Ordnance Survey used to be part of the Royal Engineers, so it's entirely possible it was them. Unfortunately, we've asked, and there's no records of that period, so we don't know for sure. These two guys seem to have survived the war. They don't show up in the Commonwealth War Graves records, though, so they did survive, although we don't know quite what they were doing here. Sometimes you get a name and a date, and that's even got a time. Saturday nights, the old practice night for bell ringers. So bless them, they do seem quite keen on leaving their mark. And then this one is the only one I've managed to find, a John Haggerty, age 11, that's actually got an age on it as well. I think most people seem to have been a bit older when they were leaving their mark, so he's quite unusual, probably one of the younger ones as well. So why do people leave their marks? So not only names and dates and events, we come on to the Golden Jubilee and the Millennium. showing nobody stopped leaving marks up on the church. These are quite recent. But some of the more interesting marks are apotropaic marks. This is our new word for the day. A mark meant to avert evil influences. So, pentangles have not always been associated with sort of being a sign of the devil. They used to be a way of protecting against demons. It was thought that the demon would somehow get lost in the unending lines of a pentangle, which rather gives you a view of a very different mindset of the medieval mind. A demon could get confused by a line. It's not how we look at things now. So this rather damaged pentangle is on one of our pillars. So a sign to protect against demons. Similarly, daisy wheel patterns, and this sadly isn't here, are a way of protecting against the devil. He would get lost in the unending lines. If it was so easy to confuse him, it didn't take much, but there we are. So yeah, I think the marks above are ours, but the rather beautiful example below isn't. It's actually fairly easy to construct if you've got a compass. But unfortunately we don't have anything truly spectacular at that. But this sort of mark is also known as a protection mark. It's obviously not a mason's mark, because a mason's mark would be on just one stone, and this is bridging a number of stones. It's obviously been made after the whole thing's been assembled. So, moving on, we find another one of these protection marks. This one, interestingly, is above the font. Apparently fonts are a bit of a hot spot for marks, although ours only has this one mark and it's above it. Other marks are more obviously religious. Crosses are fairly straightforward. This is on a column that's near the back on the south side, and it's absolutely thick with graffiti. As that's another side of the same column, and you can see all sorts of marks. This is one of the first ones that we saw. If we trace over it, you can see there's all sorts of things there. Bit difficult to understand quite what all of it was about, but very definitely religious. Another one on the south side is some sort of script. Now this is quite interesting, that obviously it's not any lettering that anyone's been able to identify. We checked with one of the experts in the area of graffiti, and sometimes medieval people would write a spell or something like a spell using a script that was only known to them. So it's quite interesting that, you know, you'd write some incantation or spell on the church in a script that was only known to you. Looks a bit runic, but it's not runes. So then, other things. Does anyone recognise this? This is actually from the filming of in 1970, filmed by the BBC. And if you're not quite convinced it was the filming of Doctor Who and the Demons, this is also on the roof. So it begins to look like there's a rather bored cameraman up there leaving his mark. Now, one of the other satisfying types of graffiti is the graphical ones, actually drawings of things. Union Jack, so we'll Union or Union flag. That particular form has been around, well, certainly since the 1800s. But it's very difficult for us to date. Was this First World War? Was it Second World War? Well, we can't really know. This is on the same column at the back that's already got a lot of other stuff on it. And it's a bird, and we've separated it out there so it's a bit more legible. Now we all know what sort of birds are associated with the village. Can we claim this a dabchick? Who knows? But very tempting. Some of the birds that get used in graffiti are sometimes seen as having sort of theological meanings. This doesn't seem to be one of those cases, so we don't really know what's going on there. But it's one of the more pleasing pieces. And a bicycle. So obviously fairly recent. This is also up in the Belgian chamber, so we know it must be recent. And that's it before it was traced. So it wasn't until I traced it that I actually came to understand it. It's really quite a good picture of a bicycle. There we are. Up on the roof, there's a nice little shield and a heart, dated 1940. And then on the north side of the church, this is one of the rare pieces on the north side, there's a musical note. I don't know if anyone, an expert in music, can date that, but it's rather charming. And then on the arch to the chancel on the south side, there's a series of circles, but we don't really know whether it's just decorative. And then, so on the right-hand one there is on the outside of the church, partly buried by a buttress, and those marks were sometimes interpreted as mass sundials. Obviously with ours there's a bit of a problem that it can't be a sundial because the sun would have to be under the ground to be able to cast a shadow in some of those directions, so that doesn't work. In other churches there have been found multiple ones on the north side of a church. Well, it's patently not going to be a sundial if it's on the north, and multiple suggests it's not just a case of a stone being moved. So it's not a mass sundial, but what is it? What did it mean? We don't know. The image on the left there is up on the south side of the tower, where in amongst all that massive graffiti. I want to get closer to it to see if we can get a better image of that. There's obviously not going to be a sundial on the inside of the church, so it's got some meaning, but we can't be sure just yet. And then further reading. If you'd like to read further, this is an excellent book where he goes into all sorts of examples from across the country and debunks various ideas and explores various ones. Then the only other piece of further reading I'd suggest is any other church you come across. You can go hunting for your own graffiti. Remember to use raking light. It's a fascinating thing to do on a church. You may not think there's anything there originally, but it's surprising what turns up. Thank you, and I hope you enjoyed that.